This is the EOS Town Hall. I'm Timothy Lewis of LibertyBlock, joined today by the casting crew that represents a lot of the block producers in the EOS community. We, as of every week, are coming to you to talk about the current issues and try to move the needle on some of the ideally movements forward in the EOS network. This week we've gotten some interesting news that I think we'll probably start off by discussing in this issue with the blacklist that we have and movement forward and theft of EOS. So I'd like to just kind of dive right in. You know, Kedar, Iyer, who's my partner here at LibertyBlock. Kedar, I'd love if you wanted to go over a bit of the recon of what exactly has happened, who is games.eos, and how did we let this slip through our cracks?
Okay. I don't even know if I'm the best person to give this background.
Who do you think is the best person to give this background?
Eves would probably be the best.
Is Eves on here today? Yeah. Eves isn't on here, so we can't call it the Eves.
All right, so, games.eos was one of the top 25 producers. We were all trying to maintain a blacklist. One of the accounts on the blacklist had 2 million EOS in it. The blacklist was being maintained until games.eos slipped into the top 21 at some point. They aren't maintaining a blacklist. I believe nobody has contact with them except Jerry from StartEOS. I'm not sure how much contact he actually has anymore. The transaction that was moving 2 million EOS got pushed through, and I'm not too much more aware of what happened after that. I think it might have changed and what we might have got or something. Does anybody know?
So, anyone else have any color on the loss of the 2 million EOS with games.eos? Anyone else really upset about this, or have any thoughts about the fact that you know, we were trying to do this as a governed blockchain, and you know, one of these governance issues, you know, this, if I recall, this was a save by Eric from Sweden, right? This traces back to that wallet, that same wallet that Eric had noticed that had been moving, yeah. And then, you know, we put an emergency block on the account after we noticed that it was obviously theft on the movement of the large token amount. And then we, as block producers, all came together, issued a blacklist to at least pause the tokens before they could be moved again. And now they, because of someone new in the block producer community, who did not have contact with anyone at all in the block producer community, through an inefficiency and you know, lack of management, now has allowed those tokens to move, and there'll be very little that we can do now to recover or recoup that loss. Yeah. So does anyone else actually have, I mean, does anyone want to speak on this topic? Am I the only one who you know?
It is upsetting, Tim. I mean, there's plenty of great choices for block producers that are currently underwater, about to die. I've got maybe 1 or 2 months of runway left, and then EOS Detroit's dead. And meanwhile, we have seen this trend of short-term value extraction being prioritized over the long-term health of the chain. And, you know, I wish I had the means to be more involved with the chain governance right now, but I'm busy trying to find resources to stay alive. So that's why we haven't really been speaking up in the governance discussion too much. But it is just really upsetting because the token holders aren't making the best picks as a whole. There are great proxies that are attempting to choose block producers that are adding a lot of value and prioritizing the health of the chain. But we've seen so many sock puppet BPs or duplicate BPs, like owned by multiple people in the case of games.eos, that, yeah, I mean, what are we to do at this point? It just feels very hopeless from my perspective.
we have we more or less have a procedure in place where the block producers and the block producer JSON, you're supposed to be able to have contact information. You're supposed to be able to be able to run your duties as a BP. And I would say that right now, without doubt, they have not, held up to their duties, to what they were supposed to be doing. What effectively, Kedar, I've heard you speak about some of the things that you'd like us to, that you feel are the right things to do. But what effectively can we do? I mean, now we have somebody who's what I say has been involved in a major mistake. Created as a block producer, has let the community down in their job, that they have been hired to do. What can we do, to prevent this, to stop this, I don't want to use the word punish, because it's not in our position to punish anyone. Well, what can we do in our position to remove this person or this group from the office?
It's possible to pass a transaction and unregister them as a producer temporarily, just to get their attention. I think at some point they need to surface. We need to know who they are, even if they don't, or at least have a Telegram account or something where we can contact them. They need to be in contact with us. I don't even want to say that they have to be non-anonymous. Maybe they have a reason for being anonymous. I doubt it, but if they do, at least have some sort of email address, Telegram account. We all use Telegram or WeChat or something. I haven't heard of anybody being able to actually contact this group, which doesn't seem right, because there's a lot of coordination required between the top 21 producers, between producers in general, to keep the chain running. Or if we can't contact them, and they're a liability to the system at that point.
Right.
Hey, this is Kevin from EOS New York. If there's ever an instance where a security, something that's a matter of security needs to be updated, we've already crafted the transaction to remove them, and we'll just do that. If there's ever a point where we all need to do something quickly for the health of the chain, they'll just be removed, and token holders will figure it out after a while, or they won't. But that will be done without hesitation. We've tried to contact them. I don't care to try anymore.
Yeah, I mean, don't you guys feel that the slippage of a blacklisted process within the top 21, does anyone else feel like that is a indication of the lack of security or a security issue within the chain? Am I speaking along here, Kevin?
Yeah. I don't think that the blacklist of it has anything to do with chain security or normal operation. No.
I think this is Luke speaking. There's an article from Breaker Mag that both Kevin and I were included on and interviewed about, and that kind of breaks down the history of the Constitution, ECAF, the blacklist, and how it was always supposed to be a very temporary solution. It was never robust. It was never resilient.
Yeah, I agree.
We've been talking for many, many months that this essentially was destined to happen. And unfortunately, I think we were put in a position as block producers to make very difficult decisions to go along with the blacklist orders from ECAF, knowing that it was creating a liability and risk and creating expectations that the chain itself and the community could not, back up. So this is in large part a story of mismet expectations that should never have been created in the first place. So now we're left with some very difficult decisions. And obviously that had a pretty terrible impact on the perception of the chain as being insecure, which is, just as Kevin says, not the case. It's a very, very secure chain. The Byzantine fault tolerance is completely in play. The fact that we have potentially, again, we don't have smoking gun evidence, but potentially one block producer owning 2 nodes is definitely a serious problem. And I want people to take it seriously. If that trend continues, we're going to have a Byzantine situation eventually. But ultimately, this comes down to the token holders. The token holders are not taking their tokens off exchanges. That's number one. So therefore, the exchanges have more influence than they should. Number 2 is token holders are not voting. We got 25%, maybe 26% token engagement. That is not enough, in my opinion, for a distributed secure chain. So we need token holders to care about their investment, to step up to the plate and do something about it and vote, like Rob was saying, for great BPs that are underwater and need support.
Yeah, I mean, the chain is obviously deposed, right? It completely relies on people's or at least token holders' participation. So I completely agree with everything that Luke said, but maybe let's just summarize it, because there's a few topics that we're talking about here, right? The first one is, and Rob brought it up, there's a whole lot of sock puppets having two BPs. I know it's not inside the Constitution, but it's obviously incorrect, right? The second one is the blacklist mechanism is shit. We all know it's shit. It's a text file that you can easily make a mistake inside of it. You move a server, have something new added. That is not blockchain, right? That's a text file that's stopping a broadcast transaction hitting the network, right? That's all it is. Easy to make that mistake. And then the third one is exactly what Luke said about the ECAF mechanism itself. It's meant to have been a temporary thing, having a blacklist. Yeah, we've got these blacklists that have been running for months and months and months. It appears that we're not getting anywhere with, I don't know what Sharif said, 800 cases that have been filed. You know, that kind of stuff is 3 different issues that we have, right? So having the conversation about, yeah, you know, this is all not good, you know, we get it, but we need to start to check some of these off this list.
You know, I think the security issue comes in the fact that, you know, we don't know if this is a duplicate BP. We don't know if we can contact this actor. You know, are they following the rules that were set forth for that of the BPs? Did they have some of there were rules in being able to post who the ownership was of the BP, being able to put up some the basic BP JSON you know, contactability that was agreed upon by all of the, you know, I think the community and the block pushers and early on. If they're not following those things, I think that is a security risk. So, you know, just in the fact that the ECAF movement for Blacklist is not something that's maintainable on the long term. We need a better long-term solution. But in the short term, you know, 5 more of these games that EOS EPs pop up, and who knows who they are. We start running into real security issues, and if we can't take action, at least to be able to get them into a position where we are able to communicate with them, I foresee that as issues. I foresee that as security.
I want to clarify one of the things that you just said, Tim. But no, I don't need to know who games.eos is. I just need to know how to talk to them in the case of something that needs to get done that requires multiple BPs to act. That's all. I know you didn't mean like we need to know their identity. Right. But for anyone listening, we don't need to know their identity. I don't care who they are or where they live or what their mother's maiden name is. I just need to know that they can be contacted in the case of an emergency. And so far, thank you. So far, there's been nothing to indicate that they can. So the second that there is an emergency, they'll just be removed.
Okay, there's a solution.
I mean, I still can't fathom the fact that we don't count. You know, from a chain perspective, that we don't consider this an emergency. I mean, I understand it's quote unquote just a token loss, but this was something that we were all maintaining. This was something that you know, there is at the other end of this a user, someone who's a part of this chain and network that has you know, had waited on some ruling, on some ability to be able to recover this, and now you know, is at a complete loss because you know, no one was able to be in contact with this operator, and that operator did not adhere to you know, the at least temporary solution that we had been trying to operate with. You know, I think that's something that from a community perspective, you know, we took the flack for handling it the way that we did in the first round. You know, months ago, we took the outbound perception that, you know, we were going to have some judgment on some of this stuff. And we, in some ways, handled it in a way that we were able to quantify it and be able to discuss that, because it was a theft, likely. And then now, someone has come in and in the name of anonymity, we are acting as if that's not an issue, a mistake. I believe it is. I think that if we can't contact the other operators in this guard, then other things, other emergencies can and will happen. But I'm just I am a little disappointed in ourselves in the fact that we have there is somebody who's elected who may or may not be a good operator. We know that they've not operated in the method that we all have. Who here on this call as a block producer doesn't have that blacklist installed because they didn't believe it was a good idea? No one.
Well, I don't think it was a choice, honestly, and this is why it was a problem. It was not a Byzantine choice. It was just full consensus. You have to do it or else. And I don't think there was anyone willing to go against what you said as far as there was an expectation of governance that was set that may have been completely misaligned. And I think that's step number one. We have to define, is this a governed chain? And if so, what does that mean? And I've yet to see anyone clearly define that. We all have our separate opinions. And until we put it on chain, it's a 15 of 21 vote. I don't think those opinions are ever going to come to consensus. I mean, what does governance mean? We've already decided it wasn't really ECAF. We're pushing forward for the user agreement. I think that's a better document to define what we think governance is. But ultimately, we have to decide. And I think a lot of our frustration comes from the lack of consensus on what governed chain means for EOS.
We were just buying some time. Luke, we thought that, we put the blacklist on, it's going to give us a bit of breathing room. No harm, no foul. Well, it's going to be a few weeks, right?
I thought it was going to be a few days. I mean, I thought it was a very, very obviously temporary solution. Like, look, we're going to do this right now, but we'll get you updates, do it now and we'll tell you why later, right? But we thought immediately this was going to be handled, and just weeks and months went by and nothing was handled. It's unacceptable.
Well, we are in this position now, and we do need to start moving forward. And in that discussion, let's talk about the user agreements. We've got a couple people on here, Kevin from the EOS Amsterdam team, that are going to discuss, a little bit into this open forum, a little bit about their user agreements. Their position on their referendum proposal. Who from the team wants to be able to Rhett, do you want to go over and discuss a little bit about the proposal that you guys have launched?
Yeah, Jetse, our lawyer, I'm sorry he can't be here on the call, but he is of course very experienced in creating documents like that because his day job. And when we founded EOS Amsterdam, I got him involved, and he got very passionate about EOS. He's in the governance channels all the time debating, and he drafted version 3 as he originally called it. He didn't call it a constitution, but a charter, because he felt that that was a better name. And then there was a Russian edition, there was a Korean edition, there were multiple Chinese versions of that initial version 3 document. And then the Alliance orchestrated a couple of meetings to get everybody basically on the same page and debate the differences between version 3.1 and version 3.0, and that ended up into a joint EOS community constitution, which was written by Jetse, but debated and mutated and developed, I think, over a course of 3 or 4 months, with a lot of people that were very interested in governance. And in parallel, of course, New York has put out their user agreement, and that was live a bit earlier. Our referendum is up for voting now, a couple of days, and like we see a lack of user engagement in voting for block producers, we see the same lack of interest in this referendum.
Yeah, we've been discussing that in this forum the last several weeks. A lot of us have gotten very comfortable with the user agreement that was proposed by EOS New York, and that's one that we were looking at trying to take action with because we believe that the initial constitution or charter, I do like the legal concept of the charter. Moving that forward in whatever we're going to do, if we have to do this without the kind of directed current status for voting amongst block producers, is something that I feel could be done early on, and could be done in a way that allows us to move forward with some of the other more critical votes more critical votes that need to come on in the future. Today we're lucky to have been joined by a number from internationally, and I'd love some international opinion on the idea of we're not going to get voter participation. It doesn't look like we are early on. So the idea that we're going to be able to pass anything, I don't think just comes with time. Because we're not getting close on any of the referendums to get a 15% on-chain consensus to move forward with something. So during the last several weeks, we've all discussed and talked about, how do we, as some of the community leaders in the space, move forward with some of these ideas, and how do we signal on chain as block producers, as ideally 15 of the 21 block producers, that one of these concepts we can move forward, we can indicate that we want to push through, we can take action, and we can let the community then vote for or vote against us based on our actions. So today we've got Ricky from EosCannon, Orchids on, and Hahn Ryu, all representing different parts of the world as well as you guys in EOS Amsterdam. Thanks for joining us. But would Orchid or Ricky or Hahn like to weigh in on their thoughts of the current proposals for the movement of the Constitution?
Hahn from EOS NodeOne here. My thinking is either EOS usual agreement proposed by EOS New York, or EOS Community Constitution proposed by EOS Amsterdam. The question is, how are we gonna ratify? Because there's not enough voter participation. So we're not getting 15% participation. So what is the standard? What is the bar we're gonna set to pass that either user agreement or constitution? How are we gonna ratify either
I'd like
one
to
of them?
try to answer that if I can. I have no more power or authority than the software affords me, and I can't force anybody to do anything. But if I were to make a prediction, I would say that within the next 60 days, block producers, whomever they are, will make a choice, and they will update it flat out. That's the way that I think it's going to go.
If you think about it, the referendum system is built on that. Even if it had to get through and it's 15% and it went the right way, right kind of participation, it all comes down to the block producers actually executing on it anyway. So it's like it's a guidance. There it is. Is it actually going to happen? So yeah, I agree with Kev. Probably going to end up like that.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the 15%. I think the 15% was just a number thrown out there with no. It's kind of like when you create a startup. Until you interact with your actual customers, you have no idea what business you're creating. And until we launched the mainnet, we didn't know, what kind of voter participation we get. Well, now we do, and I think we have to pivot and basically adapt according to the actual market, forces that we find ourselves in. I would love to see campaigns. I mean, Brock Pierce's proxy has been putting out videos trying to encourage voters to select a proxy and or get engaged. I think that's the first step, so we can stick to what we originally planned. And if that doesn't work, I agree with Kevin. We need to move forward. And if people disagree and that movement, it gets them upset and they say, hey, you didn't follow the 15%. Now we're going to go get our tokens, off of cold storage and start voting. Well, great. Then we'll eventually get something better that the users do want. But inaction, I think, is the number one thing that's causing people frustration here. So let's go ahead and move forward. And if that causes people to change their vote, then excellent. If not, then we have the percentage that we have, and that's all we're going to get.
And
I agree with Kevin that at the end, I think the block producers should take action. I think we need to give it at least 60 days because the Chinese and Korean translation of the New York document is live now, something like a week. We are live maybe 10 days. So give it a little bit of time. We had some Chinese conversations about our constitution so it's getting traction. The Chinese block producers want to understand their liabilities. So yeah, I think it's good that a little bit of debate is starting. And if some of the other block producers will vote, then we'll see some decision making, and then we can really.
I agree. We need
then we
more
can
time.
see the community. The community needs to have a voice.
I'd like just to. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Now it's I don't know, 15 people voted.
I'm just thinking here. Have anyone read the Brandon Espinosa Medium post on token rights? Because maybe we don't need one document to rule them all. We could have like people choosing which document they want to adhere. Like I'm okay. I like the user agreement, but I'm more of an advanced user, and maybe someone wants something that's more protective as the community constitution. And both documents and both kind of be together on EOS, in my opinion, because we are just saying, okay, you don't want to be regulated by ECAF. You don't want to have ECAF arbitrating your causes. That's okay. You just sign off the current constitution and you sign into the user agreement, and you will be kind of judged by this constitution. And this is more of food for thought. If you think that this would work in any way, like, okay, you want some protection, but you are aware that you are under the kind of governance of ECAF. Okay, you choose that. You want code is law. You just adhere to another document that say code is law. And if you get to a BP with a case, BPs will say, okay, which constitution are you signing? Is this the community? So ECAF have the power. If you sign the user agreement, it's more a code is law thing.
Thiago, it doesn't make a difference if block producers are using EOSIO privileges to, I'm going to say the phrase I say all the time. If block producers are bypassing valid permission checks on chain, it doesn't matter. Code is law, ECAF, whatever. That's the debate, is whether or not the protocol is going into your account or has the ability to mess with stuff. It's not about giving you the choice. Because if you want to be able to sign on to a protected environment, you can do that without having block producers having to do anything about it. You can. I'm speaking with a guy who built a banking contract over the last 2 weeks that basically takes in deposits, gives you a token in return that's one-to-one redeemable, and this whole thing is trying to set up a network of trust that allows there to be total rollback at the dApp level of any kind of theft based on these stable tokens, essentially, that are issued for the deposits of EOS made to this banking contract. So that kind of thing can happen.
Or like an insurance policy.
No, that's basically an on-chain smart contract where you can pause, control. There are a number of these that are done, and shout out to Sam Troutline, Carbon, who's enacted some of that work. There are others that have done that as well. So you can, at the at the contract level, especially when you try to enact instruments that are going to be acceptable by the different physical governances of the countries that they're in. When you look at countries like the United States, for example, the SEC, for them to get comfortable with instruments that represent securities or instruments that represent redeemable value from banking institutions, there needs to be control levels set. And this can be set on a contract basis. So depending on what smart contracts that you are working with, they can have controls to pause chains, to be able to reissue, to be able to burn themselves, or be able to halt individual user accounts and or network accounts. So those type of things definitely can be done. So again, it's user beware for the things that you are interacting with on the chain as a wider level. There is going to have to be some principles in which the network itself operates under, and whether or not you choose or choose not to, if Thiago, if you're looking at it like, all right, so some users want to operate in this lawless, the code is law environment versus the standard of a network-wide policy becomes a bit unruly. I think we all in this experiment. In my opinion, in my view of this experiment, is those that are the elected producers, are responsible for some action, and in the action that they take, they'll be judged by the voters when and if they decide to come out. The voters that have decided to come out right now, should have an expectation that the block producers can get stuff done. And can discuss amongst themselves the right way to do things and start to move on things. The fact is, it's we've had the referendum system up now for, it's been a solid month and a half, almost 2 months, and nothing is getting done. And I can imagine the frustrations of people aside from myself that just see the fact that nothing's getting done. The only thing that's getting done is that we now have had instances where we don't know how to move. We enacted things that were supposed to be in place for whether it was a couple days or a couple months that we haven't been able to manage properly there. And whether or not you believe or not in the idea of us blacklisting the accounts that we at some point agreed to blacklist, now we don't have a quorum amongst the block producers that are in office, and even those things are slipping. I personally think that there's an issue there. Kevin, I love that your hand's up. Please go ahead.
I love the hand raise thing. I want to try to, as concisely as possible, explain the choice that we are trying to make, and that is whether or not there is the expectation that block producers are able to forge transactions on behalf of another account without the private key or permission associated with that account. I'm not going to try to use editorial language to demonize or glorify that choice. That is the choice, period. That's the difference between every single thing that we have discussed and debated up to this point. It can be dressed up in whatever language wrapped around it, the EUA, the ECC, it doesn't matter. That's the choice. That's what we should be discussing.
In that discussion, I agree. There has to be an action taken to move one of those, that discussion forward. We have, in my mind now, and I don't know, Kevin, had you reviewed or have you gone over the proposal from EOS Amsterdam?
Yes.
And so, where in your thoughts, maybe explain some of the differences between the two proposals.
Well, first, I think that it would be unfair for me to give the first impression of the document because I am absolutely biased. but I will do it anyway. So I think well, that's the biggest difference right there. Is the question, is the thing that I just described. And in the EOS user agreement, it seeks to set the expectation that there is no block producer action on behalf of individual accounts. And in the ECC, there is an expectation that block producers can act on behalf of individual accounts. Now no, I'm going to go back on what I just said. It isn't fair for me to try to describe the document. I think that would be best done by the authors to give the first impression. But to me, that's the biggest difference. And in my journey along learning about how we can best implement this on chain, whichever choice we make, certainly what I've discovered for myself is that the most effective path would be one that leverages the features of the EOS.io software, namely the ability to create specific permissions that have the authority to commit certain actions. And then, well, I forgot what the second part of that was, but basically I would just turn it over to Rhett to be able to go over that. I don't think it's fair that I do it.
Let's do that then. And Thiago, I see your hand as well, and we will move on to you after we get a little color here from Rhett. Rhett, in your proposal, I imagine you've also gone over the EOS user agreement. Why don't you, in your words, kind of describe what it is that your proposal is, and then some of the differences in between your proposal and the user agreement proposal that's up.
Yeah, the biggest difference is that I think the user agreement says, okay, this is the software, this is DPoS, this is how it should work, and the ECC is more like, okay, we have to have rules for the whole ecosystem. So that's why it's a lot longer. There are so many differences that, for example, arbitration. We had a bad experience with EFGAF, so now we never want to get arbitration again. I think that is wrong. Arbitration is a system where 156 countries in the world said you can't go to local courts. And I remember that what I loved about EOS is that we jointly were thinking of creating our own digital land. And with the fact that we build in arbitration, we had our own rules. We had our own ecosystem. We don't have national courts. We don't have anybody interfering with our ecosystem because we set the rules ourselves. We have an arbitration system. We have the legal binding 165 countries in the world signing it. So we can have our own ecosystem. And yes, our document is longer. It has all kinds of rules. I mean, the whole sock puppet thing, there's rules for that we can enforce but then you have to play by the rules, and you have a system that defines those rules. It's not the software, and only it is the rules that form the basis for how you interact with the whole chain. So there's a lot of topics in our constitution that are not, I can't find them in the user agreement. So it's difficult to compare both of them because one doesn't have any language on it. It just says, look at the software. And it doesn't have any rules on block producers, on voting structures. So then it's difficult to compare. It's like a complex legal document versus a simple user agreement. So the simpleness is very strong.
That's exactly the difference. It is, a complex legal document versus a simple user agreement.
Yeah, and I'll weigh in a little bit on that in the fact that we to get into a complex legal document, that's going to take a good amount of time. I think that there's probably a lot of things that, and I haven't fully gone through the proposal, and I need to read on your side. But one of the things that drew me to the user agreement is the simplicity. because before we get into legal legal standards, I think that we need to retract into just simple agreement, and in simple agreement, personally, I think that there will be, or there can be, standards that ultimately are set. But proposing those as amendments to a constitution and getting those individually, inserted as we all come to agreement on them. I think before stepping into a fully baked legal binding agreement, myself personally, having the ability to step back, realize the basic parameters, and then start marching towards further agreement is what I would be in favor of. Thiago, you've had your hand up for a while. If you're speaking on this, would you like to speak now?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Kevin. If you get to the bottom of this, it's software, and it states that it's 15 out of 21, and elected block producers at that point make decisions on software. But what we are trying to accomplish is trying to accommodate relationship between people. And I think that all block producers agree that if someone enters in a contract with another party, and it states that this contract will be arbitrated by WIPO, for instance, as in community constitution. I think that all block producers, at least us, if there is a contract and you say that WIPO is arbitrating the contract, and WIPO send us an order saying this contract, we arbitrated that this should be done. I think that even in the user agreement or in the current constitutions, all BPs would kind of sign for that, because this is what we are saying. If you want arbitration, go into a specific contract that have arbitration, and arbitrators will arbitrate on this contract. And what I'm seeing is that we are trying to kind of impose a view on everyone. Either the community constitution or the V1 constitution or the user agreement. And my point would just be that it is in the software that it's 15 out of 21. We are trying to create a decision process that we can follow. And this is basically what is in the contract should be respected. And that's what I think we should discuss in these documents. And I've been seeing lately, because of Hyperion specifically, the Creative Commons itself. And I think this may be a good inspiration, because they have things like, okay, this is totally open source. You can make commercial use of that, and you can redistribute, and you can remix, and you can do anything with that. And you can apply for that kind of license. And you have this other type of license that no one can use this in any way. You cannot remix, and you cannot distribute. And you just go there and you choose the kind of contract that you want. And everyone knows that this is regulated this way. And this would be my stance on this, because I understand that the liberty brought by blockchain is to let people kind of free of the violence of the government imposing
May have lost.
It's the government stopping him from talking.
Yeah, he may, joining us from Brazil. Some technical difficulties. Luke Stokes, you've had your hand up if you'd like to speak.
Yeah, I think an important comment was made about enforcement. There was a discussion about how one might clarify enforcement over another. And I guess in my experience with delegated proof of stake, I haven't seen that as a thing. Like, I don't know even what that looks like. How do we enforce it? Do we actually, call in a government? Do we call in an arbitration?
To opt out?
Like, what's that?
Go ahead, Luke.
Sorry, Luke. I would just say that if someone wants to opt out,
if someone wants to opt out, I mean, part of it is if I'm engaging with someone in a contractual relationship, there's two parties that engage in that contract and voluntarily sign it. And in that situation, we can have agreements on how we're going to hold each other accountable. And I think in that situation, an arbitration forum that's internationally recognized makes perfect sense. But when it comes to a thief who's going to steal someone else's property, I don't know that any document is going to prevent that, right? That's where the enforcement part comes in. Or better yet, in my opinion, that's where the multi-sig permissions, time delayed deferred transactions, things like that come into play to protect the property and prevent crime before it happens. So I think for me, the focus of the conversation should be on the pieces that we can do on a blockchain and the pieces that we can't. If we can't do something on a blockchain, such as enforcement, we're actually talking about physically engaging with a human being who did something we disagree with. I guess I want clarity on that before I'm going to create expectations that I can't keep. And that's essentially, I think, what the Blacklist did and what we've seen with dApp. We created expectations, we couldn't enforce them, we couldn't prevent theft, and then people got really upset, and then we all looked bad. So I would prefer, just like it was said by Timothy, I'd prefer to start off very simple, very small, and say, this is what we can enforce, and it's what we can enforce right now is in code. We can enforce that. Here's what we can't enforce, and then make that clear, and then start building, hopefully, dApp layer solutions, and eventually, if a certain solution gets used by every dApp on the platform, eventually we're going to like, hey, guys, let's bring this to the base layer. It works for everyone. So again, my focus would be on, if we're going to mention the word enforcement, let's clarify what exactly we mean by that, and what the the criteria is for that. Because if we're not careful, we're going to find ourselves trying to be like the police of the entire network and trying to like do investigative journalism or whatever to figure out what the truth is of who stole what from who. And we're eventually going to be in situations where we find ourselves with a reverse liability because we accuse someone and took their property when really they didn't have a theft go on, right? And so I think insurance and other different solutions, bonds, there are ways to solve this with free market solutions that work that can actually be put on chain on a dApp layer as well. So I guess I'd like to focus the conversation on when we say enforcement, what do we mean? And can we actually follow through with what expectations we'd create?
Good words to be thinking of. Kevin Rose, you've got your hand up.
I agree with everything Luke just said. I have 3 questions to Rhett and any proponent of the EOS Community Constitution. And I'll try to go through these as concisely as possible. I don't expect you to have I don't expect anyone to have an answer to these. They would be very helpful to me because I'm not fundamentally against the idea of this additional layer of justice, right? I don't think it'll work for many of the reasons that Luke just said. But so the first question is, in my research, which is that of a layman, I am not a lawyer, I'm not a legal professional of any kind, but I have been unable to find any successful meshing between ADR, alternative dispute resolution, and criminal proceedings. So one of the things that I've been able to understand in my research here is that the primary difference between these two things is that in dispute resolution, it's peer-to-peer, essentially. Now that could be organization, a person, a group of person, but it's a private entity, and then versus another private entity. And in the case of criminal proceedings, it's the state. It is the public representation of their constituency that would prosecute or be the opponent of this other private individual. So I have not been able to see any successful meshing of ADR and criminal proceedings. And actually, it seems that the conversation surrounding this is extremely new, in that it's been happening from 2010 onward in mediation, in arbitration, applying it to criminal proceedings. So no one has discussed this yet, which is both concerning and shocking. So I would ask EOS Amsterdam if you could provide clarification or a stance on how criminal and ADR can be combined to fit under WIPO. And in fact, I would even reach out to them and ask for them, since apparently they'd be the one doing this, or oath protocol. Second question, and I'm hoping this is recorded. The second question is, in my reading of the ECC, I saw no permission structure proposal for any additional actors that are expected to hold any authority.
I think one of the failures that we had with this, this purported three-legged stool of governance that we tried to build in EOS is that there were only ever two. And the third, ECAF, had no actual authority of its own and was totally reliant on the other two, the token holder and the block producer. So I would like there to be some kind of included permission structure proposal in the ECC. I proposed one to Yetzi specifically, which was to modify EOSIO.wrap to be able to respond to non-EOSIO accounts, non-block producers, and then give a private key out to WIPO, and then they can basically not upgrade the software or system contracts or break anything like that, but they could definitely move tokens from one account to another, and everybody gets what they want, and we don't actually involve the maintainers and validators of the network. Now, personally, just for anyone listening, I think that idea is absolutely bonkers, but it's at least one way that you involve the actual technology in this kind of new world order that's being proposed. The last question is, I would like to have a debate, or at least I would like for someone to try to educate me on why dispute resolution is so necessary at a protocol level rather than a dApp level, because I have seen just as much, if not more, flexibility able to be afforded at the smart contract level than at the protocol level. It's certainly more agile. The owners of whatever is going on there in a smart contract are not beholden to external factors or external actors, and moving the actual functions of the protocol is a titanic task. So I want to understand, why is it absolutely necessary that ADR be included at the protocol level and not the smart contract level, which is kind of a loaded question, because the answer is to combat theft, which goes back to my first question, which is, how does that actually work in an ADR model in the first place? So those are my three questions that are really stopping me from supporting this in any way whatsoever. And I really would appreciate some kind of response from anyone out there that's knowledgeable on this.
Well, we've got Rhett here to respond.
Well, those are long-ass questions.
It's long-ass questions, and I think we have to have the specialists answering it. So I'll ask Yetzi to write a Medium article, if that are, in your opinion, the core. I think we have the last question with regards to arbitration. I think it's just a smart move to get us out of legal courts. I mean, the guy that lost 2 million could start lawsuits against anybody, and will be spending a lot of money. And with ADR, you keep local courts out of the whole system. Because if there's ADR, the local court says, I can't touch this. This is agreed upon with all the countries or at least a lot of the countries in the world. So that's what I like. That's why I think it should be on base layer. But well, I'll have Yetzi answer all your questions, Kevin.
I've got an idea. This is ideally, so it's supposed to be a forum where we can all have these discussions, and that ideally people from the community can get to know the people that are part of those proposals and solutions. This to me sounds more or less like a debate in two of the larger concepts of how do we want to take action moving forward. My proposal for this would be, let's set that up. Let's get him involved next week on this call, and let's do a basic debate between the two suggestions that currently exist. This is something in my mind that's yes, we want to see time go through on all these proposals. Understood that for 60 days that we're probably coming up on 3 weeks that the user agreement's been proposed. And we're probably coming up on, you said 10 days that the community constitution has been proposed. There may be another proposal in the next, who knows how long, because we have people working on this as a core concept throughout the network. So, through this forum and through any others, if there's anyone out there that's working on this type of constitution, if anyone knows any other strong proposals that have been put out, maybe let's invite them as well. But let's have a real debate about this. If it's acceptable with you, Rhett, and you, Kevin, let's get the people that you feel are most adequately available to lend their ideas towards why we should go one way versus the other. We've had this available for discussion here the last couple of weeks, and Kevin, we've gone through the user agreement, and again, I'm satisfied with a lot of the things that is proposing, but there's been a lot of work that's gone into the community constitution as well, and to me, they kind of do seem like real opposites of where the direction is on a protocol layer of where we want to go. But being able to hold a forum, being able to have that open discussion, let's do it with everyone involved. I mean, it gets sloppy on Telegram. Being able to discuss things and being able to do those where the community can actually see who are the people involved in those propositions, and then trying to maybe come up with resolutions or concepts of resolution, to kind of get each other comfortable with the movements forward. That being said, at a debate, and there's not someone who's going to be able to win and pick that proposition. I mean, even if we do this properly and we have these debates, in my mind, without the idea of 2/3 on the block production side of being able to push something through, we're never going to get anything done. That being said, Kevin and Rhett, do you feel like we should, would you like to debate this and kind of make sure that we have a date proposed for that next Monday?
Yeah.
It would be fun, but I like Rhett's offer of long form response to those questions.
And I totally agree. I think the long form medium post, let's get it. Let's start discussing that in long form and on paper. And then, ideally, if we feel like a week is enough time to prepare and have some healthy discussion in long form first, maybe as well have some of the actors involved. If you two would like to, if both parties would like to do that, I'm happy to be a part of that. So Thiago,
I will ask Jetze to come up with 3 questions or 5 questions, maybe, Kevin, like the 5 critical things you see in our document and the 5 that we see in your, and make a long read on that. But
I like that.
Yeah. So if you could,
I can't really promise a timeline, but yeah, if you want to send those over, and I'll do my best to answer them as I can. And this is recorded, so I hope Jetze can see it and answer those questions. That would be very helpful to me. Thank you.
That's great. Thiago, you've had your hand up for quite a while.
Yeah, I would just suggest that we also have Brandon Espinosa or myself in favor of this third way of having this token rights, because I really believe that this is a third way, and I think it's a great idea to have a structured debate on that. We already have Brandon Espinosa Medium post on this. We are writing something as well, and it's just a great idea.
Fantastic. So in both, or ideally all 3 of these, Thiago, when do you expect that document to be, your document of your proposal to be presented online?
I would say that we can publish this on Thursday, but I'll try to do it earlier.
So in that, maybe, go ahead.
But we have Brandon's post. Is that basically? I don't know if everyone read the tokens right post. I can send it again in the channel, in the Telegram channel.
Please do, and if you send it out to us here or myself, I'll make sure that it's posted in the notes from this. So all relevant posts from all three parties will be posted in the notes here as well, so people can see them. That I think that'd be a great idea to kind of get together and at least listen to all sides and be able to have conversations. I like the idea of the relevant potential questions or issues that everyone would have with the differing proposals. On the call today, we were joined by a number of members from a lot of our Asian counterparts, and Hahn, I want to appreciate you for being on and speaking up. But we've got a little, in this little bit of time we have left, we've got Franco on from EosCannon, we've got Orchid on as well. Wondered if either of those two want to speak up and say hello.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And hi, everyone. I haven't been on this call for a while, but I'm up and running now. And so yeah, I think it's going to be really good to have discussions internally and between block producers. But in terms of, yeah, I'm more concerned of voter apathy, especially in Korean community, because I've been looking at, monitoring basically every Telegram groups, but then every EOS holders, they hold their EOS on centralized exchanges, which means they are not aware of referendums or anything related to voting, basically. That has been my concern for a while, and I have tried to work with centralized exchanges, the big ones, to get them involved in EOS ecosystem, basically, but then it wasn't that successful. So yeah, so now I'm looking for a real action item to basically increase the voting turnout, because yeah, it's been 2 or 1, even lower than 1%, while the threshold is up and high 15%. Yeah, so overall, before, all the discussions we had was really good. And yeah, but the reality is that it's really hard to get the voter turnout in Asian communities specifically, because they are, especially big holders, they're really afraid to get their EOS out of centralized exchanges in this market situation, because they have to sell and buy real quick. So yeah, that's my core question that I was concerned about for a while. And yeah, I hope to discuss this between BPs just to get a sense of what would be our action items in terms of getting anything ratified. So yeah, that was my basic questions. I'm up for another debate for ECC and user agreement from EOS New York.
Orchid, thank you for chiming in. I think some of that kind of concern has been we've been discussing those concerns here, and part of that is how do we take action when we're never going to get to 15% voter turnout? Getting people comfortable with moving tokens off of a central exchange comes with other issues, and flooding users that may or may not be comfortable themselves with holding, or it might go against some of their concerns about how they want to move tokens is a user action that I don't know if we're ever going to rectify. If tools are made for the exchanges to allow them to get indications from their users on which way they would like to have their votes cast for them, is a problem that we've been dealing with, I think, from the beginning of the launch. And you look at these centralized exchanges, they've got so much else to worry about other than the politics of one individual chain, that it's tough to ask them to build the tools necessary to do that. So in a lot of the conversations that we had previously, the idea that the BPs are more or less elected officials, that they are should potentially take action on some of the issues that we are encountering, has been kind of the thought and direction of this forum. I'd love to see more members of the community here involved and in those discussions about what we can do from a development side to help them, to see if some of those things could be implemented. We have been trying to reach out and communicate that we are trying to help, but ideally getting more people in. And thank you for all the work that you do. I know how involved you are to making sure that this network is healthy, and that we are hopefully doing things in the right direction for this community. So we'll continue to try to have conversations around it, but conversations that do nothing without action. And it's my belief that we need to start taking action. And so hopefully we'll be able to get some proper debates. Let's start that off next week with the community constitution versus user agreement versus the proposal by Brendan and Thiago from EOS Rio, the token holders proposal. And then I think that'd be a great place to start. Does anyone else want to say anything here before we sign off?
The only comment I wanted to make is that I don't feel comfortable to leave my tokens on an exchange. So I have completely the opposite feeling.
Yeah, and then that's again a personal choice. I myself don't leave my tokens on an exchange, and that's been a sentiment for people for a long time. But the exchanges as they are exist today, and different people in different areas have different comfortability with them. So that is a user action that this chain isn't going to look to solve or completely solve. We can lead the people to a different way if through our actions and through our commentary, and if they see the better usage, if there was a better non-custodial way to exchange tokens and value, perhaps one day they'll do that. But in the world we live in, especially the EOS world, as evident by the votes that have gone on from the centralized exchanges, they're the majority right now. So making sure that we provide the tools that allow that majority to vote, I think is a good idea, because I too would love to understand the will of the token holders that choose to trust the centralized exchanges that they are familiar and comfortable with, and taking the actions that they can. So, all right, without Thiago, you still have your hand raised. I'm not sure if that's recent or unrecent.
No, I'm just clapping for you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not raising my hand.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Well,
Guys, I'm on to next call.
Yeah, I appreciate everyone. This morning we'll be getting this out in the next day. Again, I love the participation today. If anyone has anyone else that they'd like to invite onto this forum, please do so. This is open, transparent, and I really do appreciate the conversations. That we all do care about this. We all do care about this network. We are trying to do things that we all, I think, are in the best interest of the whole community around it. And that's one of my favorite parts about DPoS. And so thank you for your participation, everyone, and look forward to talking to you online. But until next week, this is EOS Town Hall. Have a great day, everyone.